30 years ago, the sky opened up, and hordes of monsters from another world invaded Earth in an event called the Rush. To fight back, humanity awakened special classes and defeated the beasts. But a new social problem arose. A class division formed, separating the mages who became rulers from those who only used physical strength. Because of this, anyone who couldn't use magic was treated like complete trash by society. But that the protagonist still firmly believes in the potential of those who use swords to fight. He's sure that the age of swordsmen will shine again, and he introduces himself as Tatsuma Amori. Tatsuma reveals that he came from Earth to this world and is now one of the chosen ones to change his class. It all started 3 years ago, when a kind commoner couple found him abandoned in the middle of the street. Even though they lived in extreme poverty, that new family took him in and raised him with a lot of love and care. His father apologizes for not having money and gives him a very simple sword as a gift of encouragement. He promises that he and his wife will work hard to save up more money in the future. Their plan is to buy magical equipment and get the boy into the best warrior school there is. The man believes that even though he's the son of commoners, Tatsuma has a strong soul shining inside him. He kindly asks the young man to try his best and become the strongest warrior of all. Tatsuma knows the world has changed, but the arrogance of nobles who judge people by their bloodline remains the same. He believes that social status and natural talent aren't the only things that bring true power. Looking at that old, worn-out sword, he feels a strong determination growing in his chest the moment he received that weapon from his adoptive father. Tatsuma understood something very important. He realized that a warrior's willpower and soul can overcome even magic itself. The protagonist assures his parents that he never blamed them for the financial struggles they went through. He places a hand on his father's shoulder and states that the simple sword is more than enough for him to win. Tatsuma smiles, saying they've already given him the greatest as treasure in the world, their unconditional love and support. With that, the young man feels he has everything he needs to start his journey to the top of the world. He promises himself that he will get stronger to ensure his beloved family never has to struggle again. The boy vows to become the most powerful warrior of all, just as his parents wished. Back in the present, the boy's name is called over the loudspeaker, indicating it's his turn to be tested. The instructor introduces Tatsuma as the school's top student and the rising star among the commoners. The crowd gets excited, remembering that he passed all the combat tests and got a perfect score in swordsmanship. However, some jealous nobles mock him, saying that a commoner with no talent for magic is nothing but trash. Others comment that since class depends on aptitude, he'll surely only get a weak profession. A spoiled boy arrogantly yells that an insignificant commoner shouldn't be near the nobility. He keeps provoking him, stating that swords are a thing of the past, and anyone who insists on using them will be left in the dust forever. A rich young man surrounded by girls scoffs at the idea of a mere commoner awakening a legendary class. He finishes by saying with disdain that a commoner would always be a commoner and that he should stop daydreaming, completely ignoring the nasty comments. Tatsuma walks with firm steps toward the magical crystal pillar. Very seriously, the young man extends his hand and touches the floating screen to begin the reveal process. Suddenly, an extremely bright beam of golden light shoots up toward the sky, leaving everyone impressed. However, the holographic display reveals that the class he awakened was D rank Swordsman. The commoner crowd becomes completely disheartened, realizing that not even their greatest genius could beat the system. They start to despair, thinking they're doomed to suffer at the bottom of society forever. Meanwhile, the nobles start laughing out loud and mocking the failure of the boy who thought he was a chosen one. Tatsuma just looks at the result on the panel, knowing that it's considered the worst class on the entire list. But he gives a slight smirk because his original plan was always to fight using a sword anyway. He remains completely confident and unafraid of the future, even with a title considered weak. The protagonist thinks that this humble result is actually the ideal starting point point for his journey. The instructor announces the end of the reveals and says the practical test will decide who gets into the elite university. The noble students whisper, laughing and commenting that Tatsuma will definitely be last place in the exam. They recall with disdain that he's the only commoner participating in that year's admission competition. Next, the instructors start calling up the candidates to hand out the initial combat equipment. The crowd gets excited seeing a young prodigy who managed to awaken the legendary class of Seraphim Archer. Everyone says Mukasawa is a true triple S-level genius and a great chosen one of destiny. She receives a powerful elven bow with ice attributes as her starting equipment for the test. Right after, the instructor calls the next candidate, the young commoner Tatsuma Emori. Tatsuma chooses a common sword since his rank limits his options to the lowest level physical gear. The instructor ironically hands him a completely rusted sword, telling him to just throw it away later. The people around him mock him, saying that without any magical enchantment, that weapon is just a piece of old metal. The arrogant noble proudly shows off his thunder hammer, saying that no one in their right mind would use a common sword. Tatsuma examines the sword and notices that despite the rust, its weight is well balanced and ready for combat. He knows the noble's legendary weapons are powerful, but he doesn't let that difference intimidate him. The boy believes that with focus and imagination, even the simplest tree branch can be turned into the strongest weapon. The instructor starts explaining the rules, points to the forest where the modified creatures live. He reassures the students, saying that all the beasts there are low level, ranging from 1 to 2. He assures them that if everyone uses their class abilities correctly, there will be no real risk. The man also advises that the students can freely form groups to ensure safety during the test. The points from the hunt will be divided according to each member's contribution to determine the final ranking. Some boys start mocking Tatsuma when they see him walking alone toward the forest entrance. They yell that actually, no one wanted to team up with someone who's destined to finish last. Suddenly, the prodigy girl approaches the protagonist and asks if he's really going to fight without any partners. He confirms, saying he prefers to work alone, and she realizes he's a lone wolf. Just like her, Tatsuma just gives a mysterious smile, showing he's fully prepared for the challenges ahead. The other participants watch with serious expressions, knowing the fight between them will start very soon. The young man calmly says goodbye to everyone and confidently enters the hunting portal with his sword on his back. He reflects on how nobles use expensive magic equipment to level up quickly and effortlessly. On the other hand, the only tool the protagonist has to face this test is his worn-out sword. The system panel shows the weapon has only one attack point and a chance of breaking at any moment. The prodigy girl watches his determination from afar, wondering where he gets so much confidence with such a bad weapon. She knows swordsmen are hard to master and wonders if his perfect score in swordsmanship explains everything. She crosses her arms, thinking that physical warriors can hardly survive in a world dominated by magic. The protagonist just smiles slightly as he walks, as he knows what people think about his chances of winning. He's fully aware that everyone sees him as just a dreamy commoner with no future walking through that portal, but he knows that true strength comes from conviction and vows to restore his class's honor at the top of the world. The system explains that magic weapons depend on the amount of energy to activate their special circuits. These luxury tools are far superior to common swords because of the strong magic field they possess. A single attack with these expensive weapons unleashes a powerful spell, proving that money buys an easy shortcut. In the middle of the forest, the noble with the electric hammer charges forward, delivering a devastating and brilliant blow. He easily defeats several level 2 wolves with his lightning bolts and starts mocking the creature's weakness. He turns to his group members, laughing loudly and celebrating the absurd damage caused by his weapon. His robed companion praises the powerful hammer, saying the young man could clear the whole dungeon by himself. The proud warrior reveals the weapon was custom, made by a famous blacksmith and can defeat level 3 monsters. He arrogantly claims their trio is the strongest and that a spot on the exam podium is already guaranteed. Suddenly, the boy with glasses gets a huge scare and falls backward onto the ground because of a strange noise. Quickly gets up to look behind the bushes, trying to understand what's happening over there. The mage is left completely terrified and speechless at the bizarre scene unfolding before his eyes. He comes across a gigantic mountain of defeated wild walls piled up in the middle of the clearing. The young man screams in despair, saying that taking out so many monsters in such a short amount of test time is impossible. The other warrior in the group looks around, very confused, and asks if they crossed paths with a strong team along the way. The mage suspects there's a surprisingly strong participant in the exam and decides to use his detection magic. He's shocked when he doesn't detect any magical traces and realizes the person responsible must be using only pure physical strength. At that moment, Tatsuma emerges from the shadows and coldly warns them to stay away from his hunting spoils. The noble with the hammer points his finger at the boy and starts laughing out loud. Finding the ridiculous situation funny, he angrily yells that it's impossible to defeat so many monsters using only common physical attacks. Tatsuma just watches him in silence, maintaining a calm and completely indifferent expression to his yelling. The blonde noble argues that the pile of monsters was surely taken down by a powerful mage from the area. His companion with glasses examines a defeated wolf and detects traces of 4th-level wind magic in the cuts. He then ironically asks if the protagonist is going to claim he used that dull sword to cast the magic. Tatsuma calmly explains that the wind attack wasn't actually a magic spell. He reveals that he just swung his weapon so fast that the air pressure ended up cutting the beasts around him. The hammer warrior gets furious, asking if the young commoner really thinks they're idiots to lie like that. He arrogantly yells that a simple commoner swordsman would never be capable of doing something like that. Tatsuma replies with a smile that this limited way of thinking is just the common sense they believe in. While the noble continues to complain about the boy's attitude, a huge wolf sneaks up right behind him. His companions notice the imminent danger in the dark and scream desperately for him to pay attention. He turns around, startled, just as the beast leaps toward him with its claws ready to strike. In a split second, an invisible and precise slash slices the monster clean in two in mid-air. The monster collapses lifelessly to the ground as the hammer warrior stands in shock. He realizes, confused, that he didn't even see Tatsuma move and that the cut seemed to come from absolutely nowhere. He tries to convince himself it was just a bizarre accident and that the beast ran into the sword on its own. Tatsuma recalls that after the Great Invasion, the monsters of this world developed high physical resistance. That's why common physical warriors deal almost no damage and can't get past their defenses. Because of this weakness, melee classes soon came to be ridiculed by the entire society. However, Tatsuma reveals that he has the unique talent of synchronization, which completely ignores enemy defenses. This passive ability nullifies any magic barrier, dealing direct damage based on pure physics. With this, even a giant, legendary beast in heavy armor can be defeated with extreme ease. He calmly says goodbye to the group of nobles and prepares to continue his hunt alone through the forest. Annoyed by the commoner's arrogance, the hammer warrior steps in front of him to block his path. He states that he won't allow a mere commoner to walk away. With all the valuable points from that area, Tatsuma calmly turns and asks what exactly he means by that baseless accusation. The noble tells him not to play dumb, as the number of monsters is limited and taking them out reduces the points for others. He scoffs, saying Tatsuma will end up in last place anyway, so those points won't make a difference. But the boy just confidently suggests they take a quick look at the current tournament rankings. The group leader laughs and says that even if he gets points, the system will consider it cheating and zero out his score. He points his finger, stating with conviction that the absolute rule is that commoners always lose to the nobility. The blonde companion appears behind him and places a sharp dagger at his throat, demanding he hand over the points. The mage smirks, revealing he used invisible mana chains to completely bind his movements. Cornered by three well-armed opponents, any ordinary warrior in that situation would have already surrendered. The warrior says surrendering is the ideal choice, but Tatsuma calmly replies that he'll refuse the offer. The blonde young man holding the dagger gets furious, asking if that cheeky commoner is underestimating their group. The leader raises his heavy hammer and threatens to take him out, saying they can later claim it was just an accident. Suddenly, an extremely scary and heavy sound echoes through the clearing, interrupting the group's argument. Everyone goes on high alert, realizing the pressure from that roar is far greater than that of a common wolf. An emergency warning appears, revealing the appearance of a powerful elite boss in the heart of the forest. Right after, the immense creature crashes down from above, causing a violent impact that makes the whole ground shake. Tatsuma ironically comments that their pointless shouting ended up attracting the beast directly to them. The system screen displays the information, showing that the opponent is the feared level 5 Wolf Lord. The leader trembles in surprise, but soon thinks about the huge profit they could make if they defeated that rare beast. He quickly orders the blonde warrior to go in first, using his ice swords to slow down the target. The blonde combatant leaps agilely toward the beast, activating his ice blades to start the attack. However, with just one swift move, the wolf's powerful claw hits him head, shattering his charge. The violent impact generates an explosion of energy, severely injuring the noble and sending him flying backward. The mage despairs, seeing his friend defeated in a single blow. Realizing everyone there is in grave danger, Tatsuma yells at the mage, telling him to quickly undo the mana chains so he can move freely. The mage says he can't disable the magic in time, and the leader decides to use Tatsuma as bait for them to escape. The selfish noble runs away laughing, thinking that having more live bait increases his own chances of survival. As the leader flees desperately, the Wolf Lord focuses its red eyes and roars furiously at the movement. With complete calm, Tatsuma flexes his arms and shatters the magical mana chains as if they were glass. He sees the danger as the perfect opportunity to test his true strength against a high-level opponent. Wielding his dull sword, the boy charges with determination and incredible speed against the Wolf Lord. The protagonist's swift charge cracks the ground, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. He leaps high into the air with his sword raised, preparing a vertical strike to test the creature's resistance. The blade hits the monster's head squarely, creating a deafening metallic clash of two colliding forces. The beast parries the blow with its powerful claw, pushing Tatsuma back as he performs a spin in the air. Upon landing firmly, the young swordsman realizes the creature's hide is extremely thick and impenetrable. The feared Wolf Lord lets out another violent roar, angry that its territory was invaded like that. With its eyes glowing red, the beast focuses all its deadly fury on the young warrior who challenged it. The creature drastically increases its speed and dashes forward like a flash, delivering a lightning-fast attack on the boy. Tatsuma manages to block the blow with his blade, but the overwhelming force makes the ground crack beneath his feet. He struggles to hold the block and is surprised to see that the beast's basic attacks have so much impact. Suddenly, small cracks appear on the rusty blade, showing that it's about to break for good. The group leader, who is running away, suddenly stops when he hears the violent sound of the battle behind him. He's left completely speechless when he realizes from a distance that Tatsuma managed to withstand the boss's charge. The immense beast forces its body weight down on the protagonist, who continues to hold back the claw with effort. The cowardly noble just watches the unbelievable scene from afar, thinking the commoner has made a terrible final mistake. However, Tatsuma focuses on the extreme danger and feels his combat instinct awaken, overcoming all sense of fear. He activates his perfect defensive stance and uses his flawless swordsmanship technique to deflect the deadly claw. Next, the boy begins to move with elegance, preparing his worn-out blade to deliver the decisive blow. He faces the ultimate danger head-on in the dark forest, taking advantage of the opening left by his opponent's attack. He closes his eyes for a second, concentrating all his determination at the peak of his swordsmanship. His fighting spirit reaches its peak, activating the passive talent that amplifies the strike's power 100 times. With a battle cry, the hero executes a devastating side slash that cuts through the surrounding air with extreme force. The Wolf Lord's eyes widen in surprise, sensing that the attack carries enormous destructive energy. In the blink of an eye, the elite creature's immense arm is cleanly severed from its body. The noble watching from afar is terrified to see that the commoner is infinitely more powerful than anyone imagined. The boy gives a determined smile, knowing full well that losing this battle is not an option for him. Enraged by the loss of its limb, the elite beast enters its rage mode, increasing its destructive power. Even injured, the beast furiously leaps at the protagonist, delivering a swift blow with its other sharp claw. The boy agilely dodges under the monster's claw, executing a perfect defensive maneuver on the ground. In the same instant, he delivers a precise upward strike, spectacularly cutting off the beast's other limb. He maintains absolute focus, realizing the opponent's reaction speed has greatly increased with its rage. Tatsuma jumps quickly and delivers a powerful finishing blow, aiming directly at the boss's unprotected chest. The sharp blade strikes the elite beast's neck, creating a large explosion of golden light in the clearing. The monster's immense body collapses lifelessly on the ground, kicking up a large curtain of dust and silencing the clearing. Paralyzed with dread, the noble tries to force his legs to move as Tatsuma slowly walks toward him. The protagonist approaches and stands before the coward, staring at him with a cold, piercing gaze. Without saying much, the boy coldly orders the frightened warrior to get out of his way immediately. The noble scrambles backward, trembling with fear, wondering if the powerful young man before him is the same commoner. He thinks in horror that Tatsuma's aura has completely changed, resembling the dark presence of a true fiend. Tatsuma approaches the remains of the wolf lord. While firmly gripping his worn sword, he jumps onto the fallen beast and raises his blade to finish the job. Collecting the spoils of that great hunt, the hero plunges his weapon firmly into the boss's body, ensuring the threat is permanently eliminated. He takes a deep breath, kneeling over the defeated opponent, and prepares for the legendary rewards the system will grant. He realizes he pushed his body too hard and feels his vision blur completely from the exhaustion of the fight. Tatsuma used all his willpower beyond its limit, and now his sword synchronization talent is completely depleted. At that moment, he hears footsteps approaching and realizes it's Ven, the selfish hammer warrior. Ven approaches with his lightning-charged hammer, cynically admitting that the commoner is truly a genius. However, he shouts maliciously, stating that this brilliant journey will end tragically right here. Tatsuma glares at him with a deadly look and asks if he's not afraid of failing in his cowardly attack attempt. The boy coughs from exhaustion as his cowardly opponent raises his heavy weapon to strike. Ven confesses he's afraid of his end, but says Tatsuma made things easy by showing his weakness on a silver platter. He smiles, saying that since his rival can't move, the examiners will think the monster was responsible. The villain starts laughing maniacally, insanely celebrating that he'll finally become #1 in the entire ranking. The lightning-charged hammer comes down with full force toward the boy, who is still kneeling and too weak to dodge. With his eyes burning with fury, Tatsuma swears he will never accept defeat from the cowardly blow of a common traitor. He uses the last of his pride as a swordsman to raise his worn weapon and block the hammer's impact. Ven furiously yells for the protagonist to stop fighting uselessly against his inevitable fate as a commoner. He forces the weight of his electric hammer down, trying to crush the boy with all the fury of his magic weapon. Suddenly, a devastating slash comes out of nowhere, instantly cutting the traitor down. The hero is completely surprised when he looks back and sees the immense and frightening silhouette of the giant monster. A true calamity manifests as the monster reveals its red eyes, glowing with a deadly fury. The gigantic beast makes a quick move and positions itself right behind the boy, who is tired and weak. The system warns that the beast has activated its blood rage mode, surpassing its limits with overwhelming power. Tatsuma realizes the cunning creature only faked its own demise to make them lower their guard in the middle of the field. The young man notices the paralysis in his body has passed and decides it's the perfect time to counterattack the elite beast. He knows the beast's defense drops significantly in this enraged state and sees this dangerous crisis as his big chance. He plunges his sword into the ground, concentrating all his remaining energy to prepare a legendary and secret technique. As the monster charges forward roaring, the hero channels his willpower and conviction to become his new blade. At the exact moment of the opponent's attack, Tatsuma performs a quick and swift draw, unsheathing the weapon directly from the ground. In a single, precise move, he breaks through the Wolf Lord's defense, executing a strike with absolute perfection. The boy once again activates his passive talent of sword synchronization, guiding the blow directly to the enemy's weak spot. The protagonist's blade cuts through the air, creating a trail of golden dust that spectacularly slices through the beast. The system panel confirms the elite beast has been permanently defeated, granting 10,000 points to the hero, while the loudspeakers report the downfall of nobles and call for reinforcements. The young prodigy runs to investigate the scene. Exhausted from the effort, Tatsuma breathes heavily and notices someone else approaching the battlefield. He ironically comments that the prodigy girl's arrival couldn't have come at a better time. The prodigy is completely shocked and frozen when she sees the remains of the elite boss and the defeated nobles on the ground. In front of the university's big screen, the crowd watches in shock as the results show Tatsuma alone in first place. Everyone starts shouting excitedly, trying to understand how a D-rank commoner swordsman achieved such a feat. They comment in astonishment that his score is infinitely higher than that of the S-rank prodigy herself. The nobles furiously demand that the system be reviewed, claiming that a commoner in first place humiliates the entire nobility. The audience starts protesting loudly, demanding his score be cancelled under the unfair accusation of cheating on the exam. The examiner receives a message through his communication sphere and seriously agrees with the report. He coughs lightly to get the crowd's attention and announces that he has some very serious and tragic news to share. The man reveals that a serious incident occurred in the forest after the beasts entered a dangerous state of rage. The instructor confirms the demise of 2 noble students on site, causing immediate panic and screaming among those present. He explains that according to reports, Tatsuma single-handedly defeated the level 5 monster responsible for the attack. The crowd doubts the achievement, claiming that a mere D-rank swordsman must have only delivered the finishing blow. While everyone argues, Tatsuma relaxes, sitting silently on the lawn, oblivious to the malicious gossip about him. The prodigy approaches the protagonist with her arms crossed and asks directly what happened in the forest. The boy calmly replies that he just got lucky and struck at the exact moment the beast attacked. She reveals that she investigated the area and found no magical traces in the deep marks left on the ground. With her eyes fixed on him, she seriously asks if the elite monster was really defeated by him alone. Yuki theorizes that the nobles tried to steal the protagonist's prize or tried to harm him during the exam. Tatsuma just raises his bandaged hand and indifferently replies that it's just her theory. The girl asks if he's not going to defend himself against the cheating accusations, but he says it would be useless. The hero knows the prejudiced nobility has already chosen their own truth, and that arguing with them is pointless. Tatsuma stares at his rusty sword, thinking that even an old weapon can prove its worth by the edge it holds. He's sure that in the end, a warrior's true strength always speaks louder than words. He accepts that canceling his excellent score to calm the crowd of jealous nobles is their rational way out. On the big screen, the examiners officially announce that they have unanimously decided to nullify all his points. The nobles celebrate, laughing with disdain and stating that an insignificant commoner should always know his place. The ranking updates on the screen, and Tatsuma's points plummet to 0, putting the prodigy in first place. The speaker begins to read the official list of candidates accepted into the renowned university. However, the instructor is surprised when he scrolls through the list and sees Tatsuma's name right on the cutoff line for the exam. The panel reveals that even with his score zeroed out, the protagonist secured the 100th spot in the rankings. The audience panics, shouting indignantly about how someone could pass the exam with 0 points. The confused examiner analyzes the screen's data and notices that many candidates finished with negative scores. The panel shows that due to serious violations committed by several nobles, their scores fell below 0. The rules explain that attacking teammates or interfering in fights results in a severe penalty with negative points. Tatsuma realizes the traitors tried to set up his demise and ended up losing all their points for breaking the rules. Thanks to this huge mistake by his rivals, the cough score dropped to 0, allowing him to get the last spot. He gives an ironic smirk, thinking that divine luck was on his side in a very unusual way. The arrogant nobles shout that for a miserable commoner like him, the university will be a living nightmare. They taunt him, saying that without the support of rich families or prestige, Tatsuma won't even last a few months. The protagonist just gives a defiant smile, stating he's eager to see this so-called nightmare up close. He walks away backward, saying he can't wait to meet them all again and test their swords at the university. Time passes, and the gates of the Grand Dragon University finally open to welcome the new students. Tatsuma notices that even the students' identification pins are divided according to their birth class. Suddenly, a commotion draws everyone's attention as an upperclassman starts cowardly kicking a new student. The upperclassman blocked the boy, asking why a filthy commoner is trying to go through the main gate. The man in the suit points to a small side entrance reserved exclusively for commoners. The aggressor grabs the young man by the collar in the middle of the street, demanding he obey their humiliating rules. He maliciously orders the boy to completely strip and crawl through the small gate. He says with a laugh that the newbie should be grateful for the welcoming ceremony they prepared especially for commoners. Suddenly, Tatsuma silently appears behind him and firmly grabs his arm, telling him to stop immediately. The arrogant upperclassman is completely shocked to be interrupted and held so tightly by a newbie. The aggressor recognizes him, trembling, remembering that he's the famous commoner swordsman from the entrance exam. Tatsuma comments mockingly that he figured the idiot causing trouble would be him. The upperclassman steps back, annoyed, saying he warned the boy not to show up at the university at all. He starts ranting again, stating that the correct procedure for commoners is to enter on their knees and without clothes. The bully points his finger and says maliciously that the protagonist won't be an exception to this rule of humiliation. Tatsuma calmly replies that anyone who passed on their own merit has the right to cross through the gate. He concludes that the nobles are talentless clowns and that the ugly side entrance suits them much better. The upperclassman gets extremely irritated, yelling about how a commoner dared to speak to the nobility that way. He raises his fists, claiming that nobles are allowed to use force to teach arrogant commoners a lesson. Tatsuma just sighs, commenting that arrogant nobles always like to show off their superiority on the very first day. He says he finds that attitude pathetic, as they only oppress the weak to inflate their fragile egos. The boy concludes by stating that without the support of their influential families, they are nothing but despicable creatures. The upperclassman grinds his teeth in hatred, clenching his fists and saying the protagonist seems to have a death wish. The hero calls the aggressors to a fight, telling them to stop hesitating and come at him all at once. He states that he will return all the humiliation and suffering they usually cause other students twofold. Tatsuma faces them with a focused and deadly gaze, preparing to teach them an unforgettable lesson right there. He seriously warns that he will return every humiliation they've suffered 100 times stronger upon the aggressors. The upperclassman charges at him, laughing loudly and saying he's going to beat the protagonist senseless without any mercy. However, with extremely fast movements, Tatsuma dodges the powerful punch with extreme ease. On the counterattack, he delivers a devastating right hook directly to the arrogant aggressor's face. The impact of the punch is so violent that it sends the noble flying backward. He spins several times in the air, completely unable to handle the overwhelming physical force of the protagonist's blow. The aggressor slams his back against the university's brick gate, causing a huge impact sound. He collapses to the ground, completely knocked out and unresponsive after suffering that humiliating defeat. Tatsuma then stares at the other accomplice with a deathly glare, making him tremble with fear in just a few seconds. The other noble students watch everything in shock, unable to understand how their leader was defeated so easily. They whisper in fear that a mere D-rank swordsman's man knocked him out with one punch, without even needing to draw his sword, paying no mind to the frightened comments. Tatsuma just calmly walks back through the clearing, under the bewildered gazes of everyone present. The young commoner majestically crosses through the school's main gate. Seeing that glorious scene, the other commoner students start to applaud with proud smiles on their faces. They cheer with joy, shouting praises and celebrating the unforgettable lesson taught to the arrogant nobility. The iron gates close right behind the group, marking the definitive start of their new academic journey. Tatsuma thinks he didn't intend to draw so much attention, but admits to himself that the feeling was great. He heads to the dormitory and opens his room door to find a sturdy boy organizing his things. His roommate introduces himself in a friendly manner as Tyoshi Matsuoka and says his nickname is Bucko. The protagonist introduces himself and the two share a friendly handshake, beginning their time as roommates. Bucko excitedly comments that even though this school is tough, there's a new commoner hero who gave some nobles a beatdown. Hearing that, the boy gives a slightly awkward smile, immediately realizing who his friend is talking about. His roommate gestures enthusiastically, saying that the mysterious hero defeated the arrogant noble with a single punch. Tatsuma tries to calm him down, saying he's exaggerating the story, but Bucko insists the scene was legendary. The hero thinks to himself that the knockout happened quickly only because the noble upperclassman was weaker than expected. Bucko states with determination that the mysterious boy is the perfect example of inspiration for all commoners. He raises his fists with pride, promising that one day he too will use his strength to protect people in need. He reveals he has the B-rank paladin class, and Tatsuma replies that he's a D-level swordsman. His friend is shocked to hear that and deduces that Tatsuma must have trained day and night to pass the exam with that class. Bucko generously pats his own chest, promising to defend him from any bullies that show up. Tatsuma chuckles, thinking that he has always acted alone, and finds it funny to have such a dedicated companion by his side. He prefers not to reveal his true strength to avoid problems, and decides to let his friend believe that for now. In a luxury mansion, a rich family's butler receives direct orders to discreetly handle a serious problem. In bed, the injured upperclassman with a neck brace screams in hatred, cursing Tatsuma for what happened at the gate. He furiously demands that his butler use any dirty method within the school to get revenge on the protagonist. The man with glasses coldly agrees, assuring him he'll find a way to eliminate Tatsuma in a supposed accident. The injured upperclassman grinds his teeth in the hospital, nurturing a deadly and sick hatred for the young commoner swordsman. He states maliciously that he insists on personally watching every second of his rival's suffering. The next day, the newly arrived students gather in the university's enormous practical training court. Bucko warns in a low voice that the instructor for that class tends to pick on commoners and suggests they avoid drawing attention. The feared practical skills professor of Dragon University introduces himself to everyone as Benjamin Lee. He gives an arrogant speech, stating that his subject focuses only on results and that the weak should get out. Benjamin Lee scans the court with his eyes and focuses his attention directly on the protagonist, standing in the middle of the line. In a flashback in his office, Instructor Lee agrees with the butler's plan to expel or severely punish Tatsuma. He silently vows that the young commoner will pay dearly for challenging the authority of the nobility. Back on the court, he comments loudly that the class has a D-rank insect who doesn't know its proper place. The noble students start laughing and whispering among themselves, curious to know who the loser of the group is. Tyoshi gets nervous immediately and whispers worriedly, asking if the professor is referring to him. The professor points his finger in Tatsuma's direction, ordering in a threatening tone for the boy to give up and leave the school now. With complete tranquility, Tatsuma firmly replies that he earned his spot through his own merit and strength. Tatsuma comments that he's quite curious to see how the instructor's practical grading system works. He explains that the first method of growth is the level, where everyone has the same chances to progress. The second mode involves class attributes, and this difference only grows as a person's level increases. Because of this, the strong accumulate more resources, while the weaker ones remain without opportunities to get ahead in life. But the protagonist knows very well that level and class rank don't define everything in a real fight. He reveals that combat technique is the only advantage left for commoners to face the nobles. Benjamin Lee warns that his disobedience could lead to his demise, but Tatsuma says he finds that very interesting. The young man challenges the professor, asking him to show in practice how this special combat class works. The instructor becomes completely furious and yells at the boy to watch his tone when speaking to a superior. He smiles maliciously and decides to make the protagonist a punching bag for the other students. Benjamin Lee confesses he's very excited to see the arrogant commoner get beaten up on the very first day of class. Bucko grabs his friend by the arm and begs him to apologize and avoid a tragedy right now. Tatsuma confesses he hates the professor, but agrees that commoners must earn their rights with pure strength. He states that fighting head-on is much better than simply bowing down and accepting defeat without a fight. Boko watches his determination, unable to say anything, as the young man prepares for the direct confrontation. With his hands in his pockets and complete calm, the young man walks toward the center of the school's training arena. Professor watches Tatsuma approach, thinking that the boy's downfall would make his dirty plans much easier. Benjamin Lee orders him to fight without weapons, as a swordsman without his sword is nothing but complete trash. Tatsuma leaves his sword stuck in the ground, saying he didn't want to dirty his blade on that type of opponent. Several noble students enthusiastically raise their hands, begging the professor to let them attack the boy. The teacher adjusts his glasses and chooses 3 students at once, telling them to attack together without hesitation. The other students whisper fearfully, thinking the boy is done for, having to face 3 mages without a weapon. Benjamin Lee smiles, saying the world is unfair, especially to commoners who don't know their proper place. Bucko watches all this injustice in silence, feeling enormous concern for his classmates' fate. Tatsuma faces the 3 opponents, thinking that his own hands are more than enough for the battle. Suddenly, Bucko raises his arm and shouts to the professor, saying he also wants to participate in the fight. Benjamin Lee thinks the boy wants to hit his own ally and says that commoners should destroy each other to get ahead. But his roommate surprises everyone and stands next to Tatsuma, stating that he will fight as his ally. The professor is amused by his attitude and comments with disdain that trash naturally attracts other trash. Bucko whispers to him, asking him to hold out for 1 minute before surrendering so he can stay in school. The paladin assures him that he will focus entirely on defense and protect the hero with everything he's got. Tatsuma thanks him for the support and decides he should go easy in the fight so as not to harm his new friend's reputation. He gives a slight, resigned smile, thinking that holding back his true strength will be a bit of a chore. The fight begins, and the 3 nobles activate spells of different elements while Bucko prepares to defend. He activates a powerful golden energy shield, impressing the protagonist with his defensive class. The paladin yells for Tatsuma to stay protected behind him until the time for their surrender plan runs out. However, the hero thinks that waiting a whole minute in that position would be a complete waste of time. In the blink of an eye, Tatsuma dashes forward like a flash, leaving a cloud of dust and appearing behind a mage. He delivers an extremely fast hand chop to the back of the first opponent's neck, taking him down instantly. Without anyone being able to see his movements, he runs and strikes the second opponent devastatingly. The hero performs a precise leap and finishes off the third mage, leaving all the aggressors unconscious. A thick curtain of smoke covers the area as the 3 nobles' bodies collapse. Defeated in the arena, Tatsuma silently reappears and touches Bucko's shoulder, who was still holding his absolute defense pose. The paladin asks, startled, if the fight is already over, and the protagonist replies with all the calm in the world. Bucko lowers his barrier and is extremely confused to see the 3 opponents fallen and knocked out on the ground. He realizes the boy used the smoke to knock out the mages and returned to his starting position without making a sound. The professor is shocked to notice that the commoner's physical combat technique is extremely solid and precise. Tatsuma makes up an excuse, saying the nobles got too excited and lost control of their magic. Bucko believes the lie right away and concludes that the rivals' own energy collided and exploded against them. To try and save face, the teacher tells them to take the 3 defeated students to the nurse's office. The noble students breathe a sigh of relief, thinking the commoner boy's victory was just divine luck. Professor Benjamin Lee ironically asks if the protagonist thinks defeating beginners is a big deal. He reveals that no noble will team up with Tatsuma in the dungeon exam, forcing him to drop out of school for good. Ignoring the threat, the young man smiles confidently and says he's quite looking forward to the next day's test. He ironically asks if he met the instructor's high standards, who simply tells him to prepare well. The students gather on the university's training grounds to begin the practical dungeon test. The professor gravely warns that everyone must complete the challenge on normal difficulty, or they will be expelled. To prevent casualties, he lays down a new rule requiring groups to have 3 people and at least 1 noble. With this absurd requirement, commoners who don't have the support of the elite are forbidden from taking the exam. Bucko excitedly approaches Tatsuma, saying he's already managed to find 2 nobles to form their group. He calls over the 2 wealthy students, while Tatsuma just watches them approach with great suspicion. The paladin introduces his roommate as a genius swordsman, capable of leading the team's physical attacks. Upon hearing the boy's name, one of the nobles backs away in fear, realizing he's the infamous student from the exam. The wealthy young man states with disdain that no noble in their right mind would agree to join a group with the boy. Bucko is left completely awkward and confused as the other students around them comment on the danger. Tatsuma immediately realizes that instructor Benjamin Lee has spread rumors to tarnish his reputation. The hero knows the corrupt professor plans to use the strict rules to get him expelled without getting his own hands dirty. His friend tries to explain that it was all just a big misunderstanding, but Tatsuma just asks him to stay calm. The noble scoffs and invites only Bucko to the group, saying a B-rank paladin would be very useful. Bucko hesitates greatly, torn between the security of passing the test and his friendship with his classmate. To pressure him, the rich boy mentions a commoner girl who met a tragic end after refusing a noble's invitation. The noble calls her foolish, and Tatsuma feels an immense rage build in his chest at the terrible story. The coward laughingly recounts that the poor girl was left behind in a dangerous area and ultimately met a tragic end. He extends his hand to Bucko, ordering him to make the right choice if he doesn't want to end up like the others. Filled with indignation, Tatsuma steps forward with a dark presence and asks if that's all. The hero points his sword under the noble's chin, who shouts, reminding him that fighting on campus is forbidden. With red eyes, Tatsuma threatens him, saying that a supposed menace like him isn't afraid of any punishment. From behind the protagonist, the other wealthy ally advances by surprise, preparing a punch to take him down. The aggressor lands a heavy blow on Tatsuma's head, who doesn't even try to dodge the attack. The boy remains standing, unshaken, leaving the cowardly noble extremely shocked by his resilience. Bucko desperately shouts his friend's name, fearing he might have suffered a very serious injury. With a chilling smile, the protagonist points out that only the use of offensive magic is forbidden by the rules. He concludes that purely physical attacks are allowed, and the aggressor begins to tremble as he realizes the danger. The noble backs away in terror, asking what the hero intends to do as he realizes he's made a huge mistake. Without hesitation, Tatsuma rushes forward and delivers a devastating punch that lands squarely on the rival's face. The impact is so immense that it sends a rich boy flying with great force toward the school's stone walls. He collides hard against the wall, creating deep cracks before collapsing, completely unconscious. The other noble, furious at seeing a commoner strike a member of the elite, activates his fire magic and decides to attack with everything he's got. However, before he can unleash the flames, Tatsuma grabs his arm quickly and relentlessly. The hero squeezes the opponent's wrist with crushing force, making the boy cry out in agony across the courtyard. Next, Tatsuma delivers a brutal knee strike to the opponent's stomach, disrupting his energy flow. The noble gasps for air, feeling the full force of the impact, and completely loses his ability to defend himself. The aggressor collapses unconscious on the ground, while the protagonist watches him with total coldness and indifference. Bucko watches the whole display of destructive power, unable to utter a single single word. The injured noble drags himself away, trembling, begging Tatsuma not to come any closer and threatening him with his father's name. The hero calmly walks toward him, saying he doesn't care one bit about threats from the nobility. Bucko grabs his friend's shoulder, warning him that hurting them any more will ruin their chances of taking the test. Tatsuma apologizes to his partner and seriously states that he will take full responsibility for his actions. The paladin shouts, reminding him that they need to follow the strict rules if they want to survive in this school. He warns that this impulsive attitude will make life even harder for all the other commoners. Tatsuma listens to his friend's sincere advice and decides to stop the confrontation, taking a deep breath to calm down. Bucko laments the situation, knowing that Noble will agree to team up with them. After all the commotion, the protagonist walks past his companion, stating that he's the only one being shunned by the university. Tatsuma asks his friend to stay away from him in public, as he knows he performs much better fighting completely alone. He concludes that if everyone around him is an enemy, pushing loved ones away is the only way to protect them. Bucko admires Tatsuma's strength and sincerely confesses that his friend did what he could never do himself. The paladin says he promised to protect him and feels bad seeing his friend risk facing the punishment alone. He points out that if the boy gets expelled from the university, now he'll never have another chance to challenge the system. Tatsuma smiles slightly, commenting that he never imagined receiving rational advice from his classmate at a time like this. Bucko perks up and suggests they ask for help at the dungeon entrance, certain that someone will agree to ally with them. The hero decides to put up with the situation temporarily, just to form his group and get the exam over with. With a plan in place, the two young men decide to walk together confidently toward the location of the dangerous practical test. The young man lets out a calm sigh and gives a slight smile, facing the beginning of the challenge that awaits him. Before them, the entrance to the training dungeon reveals itself as an immense energy portal surrounded by students. Some nobles recognize them and whisper angrily, remembering they were the ones who defeated the upperclassmen's group at the gate. They decide to keep their distance from the protagonist, believing that getting involved with him will only bring serious trouble. Bucko notices everyone pulling away and laments with concern, seeing that even the other commoners are avoiding their group. Tatsuma coldly replies that sheep hate wolves, but warns that the weak always end up as prey in the end. Suddenly, a loud, sarcastic voice catches everyone's attention, interrupting the friends' silent walk. A young red-haired noble appears before them with a provocative smile, mocking the protagonist's reputation. The newcomer stops right in front of the hero, calling him by name and showing that he knows exactly who he really is. Bucko whispers in fear, revealing that the rival is the menace Shin Izashi, a very cold and calculating A-rank prodigy. Shin places a hand on Bucko's shoulder in a friendly manner and invites him to join his group as the team's defender. The paladin is completely surprised and confused by the sudden proposal, not understanding why he was chosen. The other students around think Shin's action is crazy, saying he'll soon be shunned by the elite for this. Bucko questions why he was called over alone and asks if Tatsuma can also join their party. With a mocking gaze, the red-haired young man replies directly that his team only needs a strong paladin. His friend immediately refuses the offer, saying the two of them are better partners and will never separate during the test. Shin mocks the paladin's loyalty and questions if Tatsuma would make the same sacrifice to save him from disqualification. To everyone's surprise, Tatsuma encourages his partner to accept the spot, as it's an excellent opportunity to move up. He states that he'll figure something out on his own and takes the blame for the failure of their previous group. Calming his friend down, Shin observes the protagonist's noble attitude, wondering if he's really willing to be expelled without a fight for his spot. As the boy starts to walk away, the red-haired warrior tells him to stop immediately, showing great curiosity. He cynically asks if Tatsuma isn't going to beg to join the team, claiming to be superior to his partner. Tatsuma retorts that he wouldn't do that, as he'd rather see his friend take the chance to advance in the university. The hero is suspicious suspicious of the rival's kindness and questions why he appeared right when they were about to be eliminated. Surprised by the protagonist's intelligence, the red-haired warrior admits the boy is much smarter than he imagined. Shin decides to come clean and reveals that he managed to obtain exclusive and secret information about the test dungeon. He explains that the place has extremely high magic resistance, which severely hinders nobles who use spells. The red-haired boy explains that he needs high-power physical combatants, which is why commoners are the best options for a team. He says that if Tatsuma had tried to betray his friend to save himself, the offer would have been cancelled on the spot. The noble points to the hero, stating with admiration that he has proven to be very different from most ordinary commoners. Arrogantly, he decides to make an exception and invites the hero to the team, saying he should be very grateful. Tatsuma reflects on the invitation and notes that accepting a troublemaking commoner like him would make Shin enemies throughout the entire school. He considers that an intelligent strategist, like his rival, should already know all the consequences of that alliance. With an intimidating gaze, the protagonist demands that Shin give him a logical and convincing reason to seal the deal. The red-haired boy dodges the question with a smile, claiming in a friendly way that he just wanted to give the hero a chance to survive. Tatsuma gives a sarcastic smirk and deduces that, in reality, his rival also has no one to form a group with. The hero exposes the sham, pointing out that the rule requires commoners to team up with members of the nobility. He reveals that the real secret behind it is the magic users can't the test without physical support. The protagonist explains that the system was designed to use the weak ones as shields, protecting the nobles from the beasts. He concludes by saying that because he is unpopular and arrogant, no noble agreed to be part of Shin Hisashi's team. Tatsuma finishes by stating that only the commoners are left, and that his rival actually has no other choice. The protagonist smirks, revealing that the one who desperately needs a group there is the noble himself. Shin panics and gestures comically, asking the hero to speak quietly and not expose his problems to the crowd. He whispers that being rejected by commoners would shatter his pride and begs for help, promising a favor in the future. The noble smiles nervously, pointing out that, either way, the protagonist also needs an ally to take the test. Tatsuma looks at Shin's outstretched hand, calmly analyzing the proposal to decide if he should trust the boy. The hero accepts the proposal directly, and the two shake hands, sealing their cooperation agreement for the test. Bucko is extremely shocked and confused to realize that the three of them will form a team to face the challenge. Shin tries to take the lead, demanding obedience inside the dungeon, but Tatsuma makes it clear he won't promise anything. Benjamin Lee watches everything from a distance, enraged to see a high-class noble allying with two insignificant commoners. The villainous professor gives a malicious smile, thinking that forming the group won't guarantee the hero's survival. He adjusts his glasses, whispering darkly that unfortunate accidents often happen in the dungeons. Benjamin pictures the sad end of Tatsuma's group, hoping to see the three of them fail pathetically in the test. The scene returns to the portal entrance, where the other students are still gathered, waiting for the practical exam to begin. Bucko walks apprehensively beside the protagonist, sensing that something very dangerous is about to happen there. The corrupt instructor approaches, commenting ironically on the boy's great luck in finding a noble ally. Tatsuma glares at him coldly, asking what dirty trick he plans to use this time to try and disrupt his exam. Benjamin feigns innocence, saying he follows the school rules and has no reason to block their entry. With a chilling smile, he suggests the boy be cautious, as no one will be able to save him in case of any incidents. Bucko angrily tries to defend his friend, but the protagonist holds out his arm, telling the paladin to ignore the provocations. Tatsuma replies with a smile that his only real concern is that the test will be too easy and leave them bored. Master Benjamin Lee grinds his teeth in rage. Feeling deeply insulted by the young commoner's audacity, the professor hands the portal key to Shin and curtly orders the leader to guard the access tool well. Shin examines the iron item and finds it strange, noticing he received an obsidian key instead of the traditional mithril key. The villain taunts him, asking if he's scared, but Shin just smiles confidently, assuring him that he fears no danger. Silently, the villain celebrates, as that key actually opens the cursed dungeon, where the danger level is life-threatening. He smiles sadistically, watching the group advance, certain that they will all disappear forever in that test. The portal glows with purple hues, and Shin raises the key, commanding the group to enter the combat area with determination. They enter the dark cave, and the leader begins to dictate the combat formation to ensure the team's safety. The red-haired noble assigns Bucko to the defensive front line, planning to attack from behind and leaving Tatsuma for last. Ignoring the orders, the protagonist walks ahead, leaving the leader indignant at his lack of cooperation. Bucko activates his large yellow magical energy shield, ready to protect his friends from any imminent danger. The paladin runs in front of Tatsuma, telling him to fall back while the leader shouts, demanding they follow his instructions. Suddenly, a cracking sound echoes from under the big guy's feet, and he realizes too late that he's stepped on something dangerous. Tatsuma reacts quickly upon hearing the clicking sound and alerts his companions that they've fallen into a trap. Dozens of gigantic spiders begin to descend rapidly from the cave ceiling, completely surrounding the warriors. Bucko collapses on the ground in a total panic, desperately confessing he has an extreme phobia of any eight-legged creature. Shin swiftly advances, activating his flame magic on his swords, and orders the fearful ones to stay out of his way. The young man burns the monsters with ease, proudly stating that the spiders are vulnerable to the heat of his attacks. The noble mocks Bucko's fear, thinking that this typical weakness explains why commoners are inferior. Looking back, Shin notices the monsters are surrounding Tatsuma, while the protagonist just calmly watches everything. To the leader's surprise, the beasts completely ignore the boy and leap in other directions without attacking him at all. Shin is completely shocked and baffled to see the protagonist walking unscathed through the middle of the monster horde. He remembers that the insects in this dungeon track their prey by detecting the magical energy they carry in their bodies. The red-haired boy, intrigued, deduces that if the spiders are ignoring the hero, it means the boy has no mana in his system. In a flashback, Tatsuma recalls the moment of his choice, where he sacrificed all his magical power in exchange for physical strength. The system screen shows that he activated the hidden talent Manalus, which converts ability consumption to stamina. He planned to focus on a purely physical body, knowing that training his muscles would make him invincible in direct combat. Shin concludes that without magical energy, Tatsuma will never be able to advance in class and finds the boy completely unpredictable. The protagonist lightly taps Bucko on the head, telling his friend to regain his focus and stop trembling in the cave. The paladin stands up, regaining his composure, and guarantees he will fulfill his duty to protect the hero, no matter the cost. With the initial danger under control, the three warriors continue advancing through the darkness toward the heart of the dungeon. Bucko breathes a sigh of relief when he notices the spiders have disappeared and realizes they had no intention of attacking. He scratches his head in confusion, wondering if the creatures weren't monsters, and what the point of that mystery was. Tatsuma observes the cave seriously and explains that their movement actually served to activate a mechanism. Suddenly, a giant stone sarcophagus wrapped in chains and purple flames descends from the ceiling, startling the group. The heavy chains violently snap, and the mysterious coffin collides with the ground, kicking up a lot of dust. The door opens, revealing the terrifying appearance of the area's dreadful boss, Kalis, a level 5 skeleton warrior. Shin panics upon recognizing the legendary monster, explaining that it's an extremely rare creature. The red-haired boy realizes the villainous professor betrayed them, giving them the cursed key to eliminate the whole group at once. Bucko asks tremblingly if the opponent is strong, and Shin replies that he is infinitely superior to common monsters. The skeleton warrior's eyes light up with blue flames, showing an imposing and frightening presence in the arena. The noble laments the group's terrible luck, stating that facing that beast at level 3 is a one-way ticket to failure. The dungeon boss raises his giant sword, while whispering a macabre threat of an inevitable end for the invaders. The monster roars, and Shin screams in terror, telling the commoners to scatter and run for their lives immediately. Instead of fleeing, Tatsuma charges toward the enemy, leaving his leader utterly speechless. The hero gives a confident smile, knowing that the lack of magical energy in his body will make him invisible to the beast's focus. He runs in head-on, knowing that this cursed boss is the ideal opponent to test his new abilities. Kalis raises his enormous metal shield and focuses his murderous rage on the young warrior, who is boldly approaching. Tatsuma activates his battle spirit, releasing an intense red aura all over his body for the head. On combat, he gets into position with his rusty sword, concentrating all his stamina to deliver the next physical attacks. Shin yells in irritation, asking if the commoner has gone completely insane and warns that he won't go down with him in this cave. Butcho stares in amazement at the energy aura around his friend, wondering if Tatsuma's body really caught on fire. The paladin regains his determination upon realizing that the protagonist truly sees a clear way to win the fight. He announces that he will join the fight, leaving the red-haired leader even more incredulous at his allies' foolishness. Tatsuma plans his combat strategy, deciding to analyze the creature's first few strikes to adapt quickly. But suddenly, Butcho comes running with his shield activated, forcing the protagonist to express surprise at the charge. The hero tries to tell his partner to stop, but the paladin charges forward with determination, activating his shield bash technique. He thinks that the duty of a true team protector is to always march on the front line to take the blows. The big guy collides with the skeleton boss in an attempt to create an opening for his friend's physical attacks. The creature's purple eyes just glow menacingly, showing no signs of being affected by the boy's impact. With extreme ease, the cursed monster shatters Bucko's golden barrier with a single destructive move. The paladin is thrown back violently, letting out a cry of pain as he collapses, injured, on the stone floor. The boss lands a powerful punch on the boy, who collides with the dungeon's stone walls, creating a huge impact. Bucko falls, completely knocked out, and with a trickle of blood from his mouth after taking the devastating hit from the elite opponent. Shin is horrified to see that the B-rank paladin was defeated with a single blow and gives up fighting. Fearing for his own life, he decides to flee alone, abandoning the commoners to their fate while bidding them a cold and cowardly farewell. However, Tatsuma surprises his rival by blocking the skeleton's enormous flaming sword, using only his common weapon. The violent clash of blades makes the ground crack under the hero's feet as he bravely withstands the monster's heavy attack. The skeleton warrior becomes enraged by the boy's audacity, trying to crush him with the full force of his magic blade. Tatsuma looks the beast in the eyes, maintaining a calm smile, and states with absolute focus that he will be its opponent. Shin stops his escape, surprised to see that the commoner can actually fight on equal terms against the elite beast. The noble leader is suspicious of the boy's intentions, thinking he just wants to take all the glory of defeating the boss for himself. The protagonist focuses on blocking and shouts for his teammate to draw the boss's attention toward him. Shin activates his flaming blade magic and decides to attack from behind, annoyed at the chance of losing his reputation. The noble leaps, delivering precise strikes to the skeleton's back in an attempt to claim the glory of the final victory. But the system indicates that the back attack damage was 0, revealing that the boss has absolute magic immunity. Tatsuma realizes that the noble's impulsive charge has completely ruined his battle strategy in the dungeon. The creature easily grabs Shin by the arm, and the boy screams in desperation, begging to be released immediately. The skeleton complains about the nuisance, but Tatsuma sees the enemy's distraction as the perfect opportunity to land his blow. The hero leaps toward the monster, which is completely confused by the protagonist's absurd reaction speed. Tatsuma executes a perfect spin in the air, preparing his rusty sword to deliver a decisive cut to the skeleton. Shin is in total disbelief as he sees the protagonist sever the giant skeleton's arm with a single physical blow. The red-haired leader falls back onto the pavement, while Tatsuma regains his battle stance, firmly facing the dangerous boss. Shin complains of pain on the ground, trying to recover from the initial shock. After nearly being crushed by the creature's strength, he watches the rapid exchange of blows from a distance and realizes the marks on the elite opponent are real. The boy recognizes that he caused no damage to the boss and is baffled by the fact that a dull sword cut off its limb. Kalis unleashes a devastating horizontal attack, but the hero dodges by ducking with impeccable agility in the cave. The monster raises its blade again in a fury, preparing a powerful vertical strike in the boy's direction. The violent impact of the boss's sword shatters the ground, creating a shockwave that throws dust all over the clearing. Shin gets angry for being caught in the crossfire, but Tatsuma coldly tells him to get out of there if he doesn't want to be a hindrance. The noble shouts furiously, denying he's a hindrance, and tries to belittle the protagonist, claiming he's just a mere commoner. Seeing Tatsuma block the heavy attack, the red-haired boy admits that the boy's class is strong and that he is a brilliant warrior.